Welcome to the People of AI podcast, showcasing inspiring people with interesting stories in the field of artificial intelligence. I'm Ashley Oldacre. Let's jump right in. This podcast is sponsored by Google. Any remarks made by the speakers are their own and are not endorsed by Google. Hi everyone, Ashley here. I'm joined today by Dr. Oliver Aalami, and we're very excited to have you on the podcast with us. So we're going to start off, like we do with all of our guests, by getting to know a little bit about you by reading your bio. So Dr. Oliver Aalami is a clinical associate professor of vascular and endovascular surgery at Stanford University and the Palo Alto VA, where he integrates clinical expertise with pioneering digital health initiatives. As the director of Stanford Biodesign's Digital Health Unit, Dr. Alami plays a key role in advancing the development of sensor-based technologies aimed at transforming cardiovascular care. He serves as the course director for Biodesign for Digital Health and Building for Digital Health, guiding students and innovators through the intricacies of creating and implementing digital solutions for health. Under Dr. Aalami's leadership, Stanford launched Spezi, an open-source framework designed to accelerate mobile health research. Spezi is specifically tailored to support sensor-based projects by providing a customizable infrastructure for mobile studies, enabling a broader and more efficient approach to collecting real-world health data. Through supporting projects, he aims to enhance the precision of health monitoring for patients, paving the way for more individualized and data-driven care. Welcome, Oliver.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, it's an honor for us as well. So tell us your story. Tell us about all the building blocks that have led you to be the person that you are today.
Perfect. Yeah, I was born in LA, but it was interesting story. My father had a Fulbright scholarship. He was actually in LA for 1 year. He's an engineer, and he met my mother in London. She's German. He was Iranian, studying in London. And so early on, even after that first year, we moved quite a bit. I moved all around from between Germany and then Iran, and then the revolution happened in Iran. So I had to go back to Germany, and then eventually landed in Cupertino, which is not too far from here, at the age of 9. But, had a lot of family in Germany still. And so it turns out my grandparents on my mother's side are both physicians, they're primary care doctors. And I remember, that would be my summer camp. They would all send me to Germany, put me on a plane alone. And I would arrive, and I just, I'd walk around the neighborhood with my grandparents, and it was so obvious. They're family physicians. They had a practice in their home or an office in Berlin. And man, did people really, they had such a tight connection with the community. They'd go to the local grocer, the local farmer's market, and it was just a beautiful thing to see people, all the connections they had with the community. And so that really inspired. I think that was the key for me to early on just really think highly of medicine as a future profession, which my father, the engineer, and my 2 siblings, they're engineers. I was the sole one in the family to continue that tradition. But so that was really inspiring, having that history and background to make me want to think of medicine. And then throughout my schooling, biology was always super easy. I actually went to UC San Diego, studied molecular biology, loved that. And then went to Boston University for medicine, and then to UCSF for general surgery residency. Did that for 7 years. And as part of that, I was at Stanford for 2 years for a postdoc. And that's where I really caught the bug for a lot of, the Biodesign program that I'm a part of now. And that had just started the year I was there. And after that, I went to Northwestern in Chicago for my vascular surgery fellowship. So we deal with carotid arteries for strokes. We deal with peripheral arteries, the aorta for aneurysms. And we're basically the fire people of the hospital. If there's bleeding somewhere, they call vascular, and we're supposed to come and help stop the bleeding. But there are a lot of, both arterial and venous conditions that we treat, whether it's peripheral artery disease, aortic aneurysms, carotid disease, varicose veins, or, all the like. So, in medical school, I think everyone has a similar experience in med school where it's kind of a gut feeling. There's a tribe. You either are more aligned with the internal medicine type, tribe, or the surgery tribe, and like how much more intimate can you be with someone than like them giving you permission to be inside of them? I mean, that's how I see it. And surgeons are doers, and they like to see things. They like to see an impact fairly. You often see immediate impact. So, you take someone who's literally on death's doorstep, and you have the opportunity to save their life, and that's pretty impactful. And I think it also relates to my passion for translation and the digital work I do. How can we take, all these amazing AI tools and the potential of digital health and translate that into the real world?
So let's jump into you are the director for Biodesign for Digital Health. Tell us more about this course.
Yeah, so Biodesign itself has been around for over 20 years. Was started by two interventional cardiologists who were very prolific in innovating on medical devices for cardiology. Intravascular ultrasound. There's this catheter, rapid exchange catheter that was developed, among other things. And so they started that 20 years ago. But then as after the HITECH Act, the U.S. government infused a lot of money to turn our paper electronic health record, or paper health records into electronic health records. So all of a sudden we had this opportunity to have access to digital records. Data. Exactly. Right. And a lot of the sensors that were developed now are putting out data. So there's an electrical engineer who's a Stanford PhD. Her name was Marta Zanke, and she started, I think it was in 2012, she started the first Biodesign digital health course. And that was the year I joined Stanford as faculty, and I was always in the front row. I can volunteer. I'm here to help. So I was a huge fan of her course. And really what Biodesign is, it's really fascinating. It's not rocket science. It's just taking the design think process and really kind of creating this framework for healthcare where you always start with a need. A very well-defined need. And the kind of the thinking is that behind any successful invention, there's a well-defined need. And so really you're not even supposed to think of a solution. You really are focusing initially in the process, being a fly in the wall in the clinic, or following someone with chronic condition, and really trying to really understand the need, and understanding that need not just from one person, but from all the stakeholders that are involved in this complex healthcare system. And then, de-risking kind of, once you identify a need, you come up with these what are called need criteria. What must you have, what it would be nice to have. And then you can finally brainstorm around concepts. And then the whole process really is aimed at de-risking a concept before you even spend any money. And it's heavily based on research, getting insights from all the various stakeholders. And it's quite, it's been quite successful. Probably the most successful device is something called the Zeo patch. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's something you can wear. It's like a Holter monitor that, let's say if I felt lightheaded in the ED and the ER doc is concerned about an arrhythmia, oftentimes that arrhythmia isn't always present. And so the EKG and the ER may look normal, but they may put a Zeo patch on me, and then I go home with it, wear it for 2 weeks, send it in, and then iRhythm, the company that makes Zeo patch, would then do the analysis and provide a report for the physician to review. So that's a very good example of a successful company. But when Marta, she's now a VC in Spain, in Barcelona, and when she left, I had the I put my name in the hat to take over as the director for digital health at Biodesign, and was able to do that. It's been, almost 8 years now that I've done that. And it's, we're supposed to be solution agnostic. So a lot of people initially took issue with, having a digital focused biodesign class, because they would say, well, you're starting with a solution. You're starting with digital. And I think one way Paul Yock, one of the founders of Biodesign, was able to kind of come to terms with that is, by thinking about, when you do your needs finding, most often the fellows, so the Biodesign program is pretty, education is a huge component. We have 12 fellows a year. We have 4 policy fellows now a year. And the first 3 months, they used to be sent into the hospital only. They'd say, go to the OR, go to the clinic, be a fly on the wall, make a ton of observations and try to come up with needs. Well, with digital now, we can think about the person at home, right? You can now go outside of the 4 walls of the hospital to do your needs finding, so to speak.
Say more about that. I don't quite understand what that means.
The needs finding? Yeah, so...
And going outside, like when you say you can do that at home.
Yeah. So great question. So typically when the fellows do their needs finding, they're usually themes every year, like oncology, or this year it's pain. Just pain is the theme. And so they would, they would typically or traditionally go to the hospital to do their just to talk to the, physicians and patients in the hospital. But digital is interesting in that because of these connected devices, we can actually now think of, a lot of healthcare could be delivered outside of the home. So we can think of solutions or concepts or ways of interacting with people outside of the home. And that's why early on, because of these because of the connectedness that we have with in our world today, you can actually move outside of the 4 walls of the hospital because of the potential of technology to engage people outside of the hospital. And before things were very digital, almost all of healthcare would happen in the clinic or in the hospital. And now, there are many healthcare systems that, use digital services or provide monitoring when you have congestive heart failure. They have connected scales and connected blood pressure cuffs for heart, hypertension programs. The OMADA use case, where the diabetes prevention program that happens fully remote, at home. So, and because we spend most of our time outside of the clinic, I think there are many opportunities, to provide, great impact and, more importantly, a better experience. Because the healthcare experience isn't always, the typical consumer experience that we get with other services in our lives. So I think we can do better.
Yeah. So when you say needs finding, so you would say, like, anybody who's in this course typically would say, okay, here's a theme. The theme is pain. Find sort of a thing that needs to be solved, right? Yeah. Find a need that needs to be addressed, or find sort of a problem that we need to look into. And so the group of students, they wouldn't bring these
No,
issues?
That's a good question. And some students take issue with that because they come with this idea, like,
right.
I want to develop this concept, or
right.
I want to focus on this area. And sometimes that's frustrating for them. But the whole idea is to bring a multidisciplinary team together. We explicitly, bring engineers with social scientists and physicians and policy people together on purpose, because everyone brings a valuable, different perspective to then really look at a problem from a very, from all angles. And they're encouraged during the brainstorming sessions and even when they do their needs finding, no idea is a bad idea, or no problem is they need to be super open-minded.
Right.
They often leverage, Reddit or Facebook, and, they'll have surveys and try to engage people, if, let's say, they're focusing on oncology one year, they would really try to engage people, who are on these forums to really figure out, so, okay, what's really going on? What's your experience like? And they could ask specific questions about whatever they're delving into.
Right. And it's all encompassing, right? So if you're saying it's needs finding, it's, you find that, you're experiencing pain in your abdominals. So you're asking about, the interview stretches everything from what they're doing, what they're eating, how it's being treated, the way that it's been received, the interactions
Absolutely.
between the medical. So it's really all encompassing. That's part of sort of the needs finding process.
100%, all encompassing. And then, for every kind of unique insight you identify, you create what's called a needs statement. And that needs statement has 3 components. It has a very well-defined problem, where you define the problem, you define the population that it's affecting, and then a measurable outcome that you would like to affect or change. And it sounds very simple, but it's really powerful, because if you think about it, even with a population, you can get very specific and narrow. You could say, I want, patients after an ankle fracture, waiting for surgery, that have swelling, right? You could be very detailed, or you could be very broad. You could scope up and say just patients that have ankle pain, So
Right.
you can go through this exercise and be very focused or very broad, and that affects your population, the market size and all that stuff. And then, so that would be, so that kind of included the population and the problem. But then the measurable outcome can also be scoped, and we're very, critical to make sure that it's something you can measure in a reasonable amount of time,
Right.
so that you can then test your hypotheses and so
Right.
on. So these fellows come up with almost 300 need statements, and then they go through a filtering process by continuing to do research, talking to stakeholders, and then grading the need statements, and just keep filtering them down, until they end up with maybe, I think now we used to present 4, kind of need areas at the end of the year, but now we're down to maybe 3. So, and then they have the choice that one unique thing about the environment is that they have follow-on funding mechanisms. So they can get funding to continue working on the project if they want to.
And also, I think a follow-up question is, the needs finding also, does that also include talking to, like surgeons and physicians and professionals that are delivering care, not just folks who are
Absolutely.
receiving care?
It's all the stakeholders. So
okay.
insurance companies, the
Oh, wow. Yeah.
billing people, the surgeons, really all the stakeholders. Because for whatever concept you end up coming up with when you're brainstorming, and as you're filtering through your concepts, the best concepts are the ones that really check off the box for all the stakeholders.
Right.
And those have a greater chance of being adopted. If you're really focused on one stakeholder, but you're really not doing much for the other stakeholders, you just have a lower chance of being adopted. So it's a really tough, healthcare is very challenging to get.
Yeah. Well, it's all
adopted.
connected. There's so many moving
Yes.
pieces. And as you said, when you're addressing a need, I'm assuming you're having to consider all of these different stakeholders.
Absolutely, especially because unlike the consumer world where, if I want, let's say, a car, or I want to buy a new phone, I have a choice. I wanted the latest Pixel phone, I can pick it and buy it, and then I pay for it, and I get the phone. But in healthcare, I'm paying my insurance company, I get my care from the doctor, but I don't pay the doctor. The insurance company pays the doctor.
Right.
It's like very convoluted and complex.
Right.
So
Right. And there's the pharmacy where you get your medication.
Oh, yeah. It's very confusing and very complicated. So that's why it's really important to understand and consider all the stakeholders.
So you've got the needs finding. Then what's the step after that?
Yeah. So after the needs finding, you kind of you create these need statements, and then you have these needs criteria, which is almost where whenever you come up with a product, I'm sure it's the same at Google. When you have your products, you have specifications, right? You define, what the product requirements are. And that's really what the needs criteria are as well. And those are all pretty measurable, and there are categories about efficacy, cost, safety, usability. So we have these categories, and you go through those and you write the must-haves and the nice-to-haves. And then you can really, based on those, start brainstorming would be the next step, brainstorming through concepts. And then it's a very challenging project because people fall in love with their ideas, you can imagine. And so it's very hard to, let go of ideas that you just have fallen in love with based on this very, this process of kind of weighting the concepts, and everything has to go back to the needs criteria, and it has to meet the needs statement.
Prototype, so brainstorming, prototyping, sort of what are the next steps after that?
Getting to an early prototype is so important to test your hypotheses. So that's a huge part of the early stage, whether it's a technology you're testing or, an engagement or reaction. And in the digital world, that actually is a great segue to Spezi. Like, why Spezi? What does it serve?
What is Spezi? Let's jump.
Good point. So I'm just gonna go with the theme. It's a prototyping tool. So first of all, we started as Cardinal Kit, which was a template application. Then we realized, students were taking a lot of time to kind of break up the template application and then rebuild it just to have the components that they needed. So then we realized that we needed to make it more modular. So we have an Android version, we have an iOS version, and it's quite modular, so that if, let's say, I came up with a new patch, a wearable patch that does something fancy, we have a Bluetooth connectivity module, we have an onboarding module, we have, a way to ask survey questions, or ask for active tasks to be done by somebody in a very timed or scheduled way. And then on the back end, we have always been a Firebase, Google Firebase, user for this. That's kind of out of the box what we use, because it really makes it very easy to stand up these applications. And it's kind of a serverless approach for us. So it works really well to manage authentication, and we use Firestore as the database on the back end, and it's quite, it makes things very easy for the students to stand up, and so they can really focus on the unique aspects of the application that they want to build. Oftentimes, it can have, an AI algorithm running on a cloud function, or even on device. So Spezi has a lot of, interesting and unique tools to just speed up the development. Something else I noticed early on is that you'd end up with all this data on the database, and it was very hard. It was very daunting, I would say, for the researchers who may not be savvy data scientists to get insights on their data. So we created what's called the Spezi data pipeline, which is just a Python library that you can run in Colab to more easily, just quickly get oversight into or insights on the data. Is there missing data? Because whenever you run these trials, it's quite complicated. You always want to know, are patients connected? Did they drop out? Why did they drop out? And you want to be able to follow up and engage them to make sure that they're that they get back on track, or to figure out what's going on. Can we be helpful? So having kind of this, that's kind of our low-level dashboard, is the Google Colab interface for the pipeline, so we can quickly get insights.
And it's completely open source to anyone. So anybody. And what was the rationale behind open sourcing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're huge. It's all on GitHub, all open source. You can just Google Stanford Spezi, and everything is there in terms of projects, documentation, all that. So we even had that same question from the Office of Technology and Licensing from Stanford. They're like, this can't be open source. We need to close it. But I think we're able to convince them that, there's greater value in kind of just building the ecosystem
Mm-hmm.
and growing the ecosystem by keeping it open source. And again, it's such a challenge that so many people around the world are having when they want to build these health applications. There are unique things you need to consider, such as, the privacy.
Right.
Privacy, data standards. I didn't really get into that much, but we're very, very interested in interoperability of the data. So, the data schema we use is we use HL7 Fire. That's how we store the data on the back end. And that's what's now government mandated actually for electronic health records. To when they share data, you're supposed to use that standard. So we wanted to comply with that, and so that we could make it easier to share the data with electronic health records and also ingest data from electronic health records. So data interoperability is important. And so now you get that kind of out of the box. And we knew that if we tried to make it closed source, it would be just like any other dev shop, and that wasn't really what we want to be. We don't want to be a dev shop. We just want to create. We're more interested in creating this, powerful infrastructure or backbone that many can benefit from.
Yeah.
So funding has been a challenge, to keep it
Sure.
going, but
Yep.
it's like in academia, it's like anything else. You just have to apply for grants and
Yep.
support it
Right.
through those mechanisms, and it's worked just fine.
Yeah. Where does AI fit into all of this? And what is the journey? Because I'm assuming it wasn't one day like, hey, we should be incorporating AI.
Something unique about digital, and especially a lot of the data types we get from patients are, it's a lot of data. It can be time series data over, weeks and months, or a high frequency, 100 hertz or greater, for raw accelerometer data for different activities. So even before, this LLM craze, there were quite a few projects that just needed help analyzing or evaluating or looking at all this data, to make sense of it. So it was again a needs-based thing where, we had a lot of data that was challenging to analyze. So it started there. And then as Google, also, with TensorFlow and all these other tools, that were also open, were becoming available. And we have a lot of research at Stanford going on with computer vision and so on. With this LLM craze, it's just gone, it's gone berserk. Like every project has something, but there's a few really interesting ones that you can do or one that I was excited about as a physician. And I think as most of us, when we go to doctor's offices, you're still faced with a clipboard often that's asking you all these questions about your history. Yes. So, is there a way to just, use the data that you have on your phone and have a conversation to kind of autofill that clipboard and then just share a PDF or something with the provider. Yeah. And I think for people listening, I think there's a huge opportunity. I don't think unfortunately it's not public enough or it's not talked about enough, but the government has now mandated for years that every certified electronic health record expose an API so that you and I can get access to our own health record. So I don't know if you're aware of this. It's through the 21st Century Cures Act final rule. And they keep expanding what data elements need to be exposed. And this is a huge, huge, huge opportunity where you can literally get on Google, it would be Health Connect. You can ask through an API, you would use the same login credentials. I'm a Kaiser member, so I would use my Kaiser login, and I can pull all my data onto my phone. And then now you have the records on the phone. And of course, it's private. Everyone's worried that the data is shared with everyone, but it's on the phone. And then you can leverage if you wanted to LLMs to almost have a dialogue with your phone or to help fill out those forms or whatever, which medications am I on, or could there be any interactions, or really interesting things that you could start exploring. So so that's an area we're really excited about, where I think they're just we're not leveraging those opportunities enough. I just think, and part of it is that, even though the government mandated it because of COVID, they haven't enforced it. So if you're an Epic shop, typically they do it. If Epic is an electronic healthcare record system, if you're not an Epic shop, it may not be necessarily ready for you to expose, or to connect with. But there's some incredible opportunities, and the government, really what they're trying to do is to help you be they want us to be stewards of our own health, better stewards.
Yeah.
And it's challenging. It's, I don't enjoy looking at my health stuff every day. It's not like Facebook or Instagram or whatever. But at least, when health affects one of us, it really is top of mind. It's like the first top priority, whether it's a cancer incident or a heart attack or surgery or whatever, we should have the tools or the means to really make the most of that data. So
absolutely.
So I think just getting back to the AI and the potential, and I think we have all this data now available, and with all the tools, whether it's through computer vision and, photos, images, x-rays, or now the health record, or even, all the health, wellness data we have on our devices, there's a lot of opportunity. We built a demo called Health GPT early on. That's where you could just have a dialogue and say, how did I sleep in the last week? How did it compare to the week before? And just as a different way of engaging with all the data on the device.
Yeah. What seems to be interesting in the pattern that I'm noticing with AI in this space is, I think there was a wave where, as you said, there was just an abundance of data. And AI, I think, was introduced as a way to make sense of that data by filtering or sorting or finding patterns and being able to process. And I think that's still the case. And you said even with, computer vision, is it just a great tool to be able to process the massive amounts of data that we have. And I think with this large language model sort of revolution, now you're turning more into an interaction with the data as opposed to sort of just analyzing it and getting sort of answers or patterns from it. It's much more of you're able to actually engage with your health and with your data more like on a conversational level. It's kind of this trend that I've been seeing. Is that?
Yeah, and I agree. And we're actually doing a study right now. There's an application called LLM on Fire, and Fire spelled FHIR. That's that data standard. Mm-hmm. And so we're letting patients who are about to be discharged, who had a very long hospital course, to kind of have a dialogue and ask questions about what happened, while they're in the hospital. I mean, even I myself, I'm a surgeon. My wife had thyroid cancer and had to have surgery, and they had all this blood work, and there were lab tests in there that I didn't even know, what they meant. And she asked me, like, come on, you're a doctor, you should know, like, what does this mean? T3, T4. And there's so much data, and there are a lot of questions that come up. Like, does this, it says it's borderline. What does that mean? Do I need to do anything differently? So there's so many, it can provoke a lot of anxiety. So having, obviously there are issues with LLMs and hallucinations and so on, but, I think it can get you to a place, and we've done studies on this, and they're pretty, overall they're pretty good at helping with some guidance. It shouldn't be the end all be all, but when if it's that versus while you're waiting to talk to your doctor, I think there's going to be a lot of potential there to have a dialogue, like you said, with this complex information. And I know at Stanford there's some groups they've created these foundation models for images. So imagine having an x-ray, and we usually get the reports, we don't get to the images, but imagine being able to see the image and say, well, what is the concern, and it'll like show you, like it'll put a circle around like this is what we're worried about, and
Wow.
or this is what looks different, and this is what it represents. They're, amazing things that can really help with engagement, understandability, something we talk about. We kind of live in a bubble, but a lot of people, literacy is an issue, language is an issue. I mean, that's very low-hanging fruit, which these models can do very well,
Right.
when it comes to translation, explain it to me at a 5th grade level or something like that.
Yeah.
Very powerful, I think. And it's very low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, absolutely. Can anybody apply to this program?
Well, for Biodesign, the fellowship, yes. For the 2 courses, those are Stanford courses. So that's usually for like Stanford undergrads, grad students, med students. But for the fellowship, that's open. There's an application process that happens once a year, and there are 2 types. There's the Biodesign Innovation Fellowship, and then there's the Policy Fellowship, because we've realized, I think I started with that in the opening, that policy,
Yep.
It's amazing how policy drives or can either be a tailwind or headwind when it comes to innovation and, keeping things from being,
Right.
You can get, let's say, a code, a diagnosis code or a billing code, but if it's not, or you can get FDA approval for something, but it doesn't mean it's going to be reimbursed, right? So you have to
Right.
work with CMS to make sure that, there's a pathway to get reimbursed, because if it's not reimbursed, no one,
Right.
no one's going to use it. So I must say, though, for a lot of the digital health solutions that focus on, on prevention prediction, usually, there are, I would say, 3 very clear kind of homes or early adopters of digital solutions. And the first would be integrated delivery systems, So you've heard of the Kaisers. I mentioned that earlier, that where they're the payer, they're the provider, they're the pharmacy. So they actually will go the extra mile to connect with you in a low-cost setting to be preventative and predictive. Another one would be a self-insured employer like Google. Google has a benefits program, and I know that they employ a lot of solutions for their employees to, whether it's if you have diabetes or lower back pain. There's this company called Hinge Health, which all they do is provide, well, not all they do a lot, but let's say if I had low back pain, which is pretty common, they would provide home-based physical therapy, right, as a first choice, rather than, what's most common. If you're in a fee-for-service system, they're going to recommend injections and potentially surgery, for lower back pain, because, you may have a bulging disc. But it turns out, and the data's out there, there's just tincture of time and physical therapy will get you the same results, if not better, right? So companies who are on the hook for paying for the healthcare of their employees are very interested in these sorts of digital solutions. So that's, that's
Makes so much sense.
Yeah, that's the second one. And then there are other value-based alternative payment models that the government has pushed and continues to want to push. The biggest one now is called Medicare Advantage. It's basically Medicare, but it's administered by private companies. But it's kind of flipped in that, if I'm if I'm administering a Medicare Advantage plan and you're in my plan, I get paid a lump sum of money at the beginning of the year, and it's up to me to spend that money wisely to keep you healthy. So if you end up in the ER 50 times, then it's my bad. I should have done a better job taking care of you. So again, they've been in the news recently, but I think over 50% of Medicare patients are now Medicare Advantage, which is huge. It's like 54% or something. And I think they want to drive that even higher.
Yep.
Again, just to flip the incentives so that health systems focus more on, prevention rather than just sick care or waiting.
Yep.
Or they don't want them to be incentivized to just do things all the time.
Yeah.
So
I have enjoyed this conversation a lot, and I am so thoroughly impressed with the breadth of everything that you have to keep track of. I mean, you are still doing surgeries, so you're having to do surgeries, I'm sure keep up with the research. You're running this class. You're having to learn all about digital health and platforms and app development. Now there's AI that's being thrown in the mix, and policy and government. Like, how do you keep track of all of this? This is incredible.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, like most, it's an academic position. So I was in private practice for 5 years. So I was on that treadmill where the demands on you clinically are a lot higher. The nice thing about academic practice is, I have 3 clinical days and about 2 days where I can play professor, But so that's very helpful. I think that needs to be said. And honestly, this is it is a passion, to kind of continue innovating, improve this processes that we have, and I think I just see there's so much potential. And just squeezing as much juice out of that, that orange or whatever, that potential is what, is what I'm passionate about. So it really does wake me up. I get excited about doing it all. And the surgery part is, I've been doing it for a while, and we also train residents. We have residents that we have to take through these procedures, and, blending it all together. I think it provides a unique opportunity and insight to see, this, we can improve this process. Right. And, as you're doing it, you can, run studies and try things, to improve processes. So I think it's a unique position. And
well, speaking of blending, I think the concept of being a person of AI has definitely changed, and I think does include a lot more of this blending that you're talking about. I mean, historically, people of AI were sort of reserved to researchers that were in the field building the technology, pushing it forwards. And then it moved over into developers who were building on top of the platforms and on top of the technology and the frameworks and building applications with it. And now consumers are using it, and it's in your phone, whether they know it or not. It's, in photos, on your devices. It's kind of all around you. And so this definition of what it means to be a person of AI keeps changing. And so my question to you is, do you consider yourself now a person of AI, with having all of these, with AI really being included not just in your course, but in your work, and then the app development? And if, and what does that kind of mean to you? What is this definition of being a person?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. And I think you're very right. I think the environment you're in it matters, and it can make a difference. So I think what's unique about the environment is you have these incredible kind of foundational researchers, and literally across the street from the Gates building is the hospital. So, and I have to give the institutions, that value interdisciplinary work a lot of credit, because I think in those places there's this natural kind of cross-pollination. And, my closest collaborations are with, CS, professors. And now the School of Medicine is hiring a lot of researchers. So we actually have a 22-person cluster hire going on right now.
Wow.
For AI researchers. That, some are going to be physicians, some will be AI researchers, but the whole idea is to have a cohort of applicants that are going to work very closely together to push the field forward. So I think it's blending. And I think the key word is translation. And if you want to translate this work, you need to have that collaboration. So I'm, Biodesign and the work I do, I'm very interested in translation. How can we take, all these innovations and translate it into the real world in a scalable way? And that's something, access to healthcare, or scaling access to healthcare, is really what we want to do. And I think these AI tools are definitely in the tool, should be in the tool set of what it can provide. I think the next generation is pretty, is going to be, a blend of physicians or traditional MD trained students who have a background and development who can then take, these Gemini models and implement them to, translate into really remarkable use cases, that they encounter during their training. And so I think the future is bright.
Well, thank you so much for coming today and for sharing your incredible story and for being at the forefront of this great future and working with students and researchers and future doctors to really look at this holistically and solve the problems that we need solved.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And for anyone listening interested in reaching out, our contact information is pretty public on our website, so feel free to reach out.
Great. And we'll link all of the information in our show notes. So thank you so much.
Fantastic.
If you would like to learn more about our conversation or our guests, check out the links below. Please subscribe, and if you're feeling extra generous, give us a 5-star rating. We would love to hear from you, so leave us a comment. We'll read every one. Until next time, thank you for listening.